Hello, welcome back. Today, I'm going to continue reading from my book, Sparrowmancer. It has been a year since I read this book on this channel. These particular videos are not very popular, but that's all right. Hopefully, they will help someone relax. I wrote this book 5 years ago. It is my 5th book. There are 2 more after this one. And today we are beginning Chapter 9. Architecturally, West Yim was congruent with East Yim. The elegant, gone buildings were all mostly unbroken. Stone staircases went down onto streets that must once have swarmed with life. The people who'd perished here had likely never felt the real presence of death as an entity. The collapse had spared them worse horror than the end of the world. The shadows were too long and too deep here. The divining charm led Sparrow and Machuk to a place where many Naveb had died. The dead lay in the street between buildings decorated with flags. There were Naveb structures, fire pits, totems. A dead man knelt in a dry fountain. His jaw was split open, and a tentacle was in his mouth. It was wrought black and rubbery, with fuzz on it. Sparrow and Machuk began to see more tentacles winding up streetlights, twisting from high windows, and sprawling over asphalt on beds of red mold. "What are these?" Machuk asked. There was a knot of tentacles bursting from a large sandstone flower pot. She poked it with the point of her spear, and it responded by uncoiling and waving at her. "I don't know," Sparrow said, "but let's not touch them." Though it was midday, the light began to dwindle. After a while, they came to an area that was as dark as if it were night. The tentacles grew thicker here, and they were more active. Some had iridescent green blooms on them. Sparrow and Machuk walked into the magic miasma, avoiding the tentacles that reached for them as they passed. "Magic caused all this?" Machuk asked. "Magic is just method," Sparrow replied. They went on. With all the alien magic here, it was difficult feeling for the ley magic that was endemic to the area. Gone cities were always dimmer anyway, quieter on the magical front. The magically blind had built them. Sparrow's divining charm pointed Machuk along a thin thread, a subtle path toward the node they were looking for. It would be something the gone people had considered special for reasons they couldn't have understood. A park, a bridge, a radio tower, or it would be standing on its own in a garden. There were many gardens here, but they were all dead. As true night was nearing and the stars were waking, a bundle of tentacles rose between Sparrow and Machuk. It took a human shape and tightened until it was solid. A red gold crown appeared on its head. The thing made Sparrow's body ache. so he deactivated his pain receptors. Then he felt only the immense pressure of the nightmare creature's imposition on the real. For a moment, the physical space around the tentacle thing shimmered and warped. The shimmer died down as the world accepted a new, vile being. Machuk grabbed Sparrow's arm and squeezed it. "Zook's wives," she whispered. "It's an avatar of Galhoth," Sparrow said. "What does that mean?" Machuk asked. The tentacle thing turned left and right, searching. It writhed in place, silent as the storming sky before thunder. "It's an incarnation of the god blighting this city," Sparrow said. He wondered what would happen if he punched this tentacle beast. Could he mow it down with his paragon? He took an enchanted trinket from his amulet bag and bounced it in his palm. Then he held it up, and the tentacle thing bent toward it. "It doesn't see the mundane world," Sparrow said. "We're too small for it. It considers the physical to be insignificant, but it seems to be drawn to magic." Sparrow threw the trinket far away to his left. The avatar turned to pursue it, walking past Sparrow and Machuk as if they weren't even there. "Is it safe to be carrying a bag of those things?" Machuk asked, her voice shaking. "It's an amulet bag," Sparrow explained. "It hides magic. I'm always prepared." Machuk watched the avatar slouch away. Sparrow saw its reflection in her wide eyes. Would her fear make her irrational? Could he count on her to think on her feet? "Is this a situation you find yourself in often?" she asked. "Not this one exactly," Sparrow replied. "But I once saw someone torn apart by magivorous dire fae. That was a lesson." Machuk frowned. "What will that avatar do if it catches us?" "I don't know," he replied. He wished he could cast a calming cantrip to stem Machuk's shaking. Her emotion was a liability. Let's not get caught. They crept away from the avatar and went down a starlit alley. More avatars appeared, curling out of the air like smoke in reverse. The world howled as they were born. Sparrow and Machuk picked a careful way around them, leaving a confounding trail of enchanted trinkets. Why did Galhoth want West Yin? What was he guarding? It was not for gods in this world. Sparrow was curious, but he hoped never to learn the answer. He would rather see Galhoth return to the empty heavens, the sacred nothingness of all gods' providence. "Maybe the node we're looking for is right under Galhoth," Machuk said, holding up the divining charm. She and Sparrow were crouching behind a gutted restaurant. "What then?" "Then we're fucked," Sparrow replied, "because we can't use one he's emanating from." They followed the charm, avoiding the open doors of gift shops, hotels, and apartment buildings. No stairs, no ladders. It was best to stay where there were avenues of escape. When Sparrow ran out of enchanted trinkets, he walked into the open to draw the avatars away from Machuk. He cast a cantrip for courage, and they followed him, stumbling down curbs and over dead bodies. He went up and down the streets, through alleys, over fences. The avatars dogged him, jogging, sprinting. Sparrow stayed ahead of them, even as he felt himself weakening. He took a risk and ducked into a supermarket. The avatars staggered in, falling over each other in the entrance, while Sparrow watched them from the aisles. He hid in a freezer, in the stockroom, behind the service desk. The avatars made frustrated sounds as he eluded them, but he wasn't sure how long he could do it. The air was full of bad magic. It was a tremendous force on Sparrow, on everything. The power of Galhoth seeped into West Yim and sucked life from the air and spring from the ground. It changed the weights of things, made shadows almost as dense as water. A pair of avatars almost caught Sparrow in the unisex bathroom. When they neared him, they opened two wide mouths with pink things twisting inside. He kicked one over and pushed another against the wall. A third lunged at him as he rammed the door and left the bathroom at top speed. He had to get out of the dark, out of enclosed spaces, or he wouldn't be running for long. The weight of vile cosmic energy would crush him to the ground. Would he rise then, filled with it, brought to new tormented life? He couldn't know. He left the avatars stumbling around the supermarket and tried to block the door as he left. Then he ran a long way back to where he had last seen Machuk. Machuk had continued to follow the divining charm while he was distracting the avatars. Now Sparrow found her trail from the street, crossed several dead brown front yards, and joined her in front of a hollow shop with a gaping front door. Machuk greeted him with a brief hug. He was surprised and almost forgot to squeeze her back. "You're too reckless," she said. "I saw what you did. You said not to go into any buildings." "Desperation," Sparrow said. The weakness in his voice embarrassed him. More tentacle avatars appeared, and they began to sing to each other while they hunted. Their voices were like grinding glass. Their song comprised 6 long, repeated phrases, each one more terrible than the next. Galhoth's influence was stifling, cruel, and getting worse. It stretched between every molecule of air, a malignant, magical energy so intense that Sparrow was surprised the world didn't fly apart. It was far worse than he'd hoped it would be. How could the universe contain such a force? His head started to ache. His stomach turned, and he felt faint. Still, he followed Machuk along that quiet ley line. The divining charm swung constantly from her fingers. She didn't have magic. She must have felt Galhoth, but Sparrow was certain she didn't feel the same thing he did. An infinite, evanescent, soul-skewering malice. Her natural insensitivity to magic was here as great a mercy as it was a danger. Sparrow pushed as far as he could while his body weakened. Finally, Machuk forced him to stop. They hid behind a tipped truck while 6 avatars circled near them. The sound of them dragging their wet masses around was almost worse than their malefic singing. "This is too much for you," Machuk said to Sparrow. "You're barely on your feet now." "I can keep going," Sparrow said. Then his vision clouded, the world began to shrink in front of him, and he slipped into black. When Sparrow came to, Machuk was setting him down on dead grass. She looked into his face, patted his cheeks, and he took her wrist in his hand. "What happened?" he asked. "You passed out," Machuk said. "I carried you out of the street, away from those things. Your divining charm pointed me here. Is this the node?" Sparrow struggled to his feet. Machuk helped him, pulling him up by his hands. He felt as if he weighed 1,000 pounds. His spine was like a bolt of lightning. His cervical muscles were like molten lead. When he could finally stand, he had to lean on Machuk. "How'd you carry me?" he asked. "You're not that heavy," Machuk said. "Now, focus." Sparrow looked around. They were in someone's back garden. To their right was a dark, columnar house. It went up 2 stories, windows all over it, and became flat and featureless at its top. The back door was open, and there was nothing inside. Empty black, the staring void. All the other houses around them were like this one, and all of them were no doubt just as haunted. This was a charged neighborhood. Many had died here. Their bodies were in their gardens, in their homes, on their porches. People who hadn't wanted to leave during the collapse. It was right there in this garden. It was a single menhir, the node Sparrow had been looking for, gray-brown in color, with blue flowers at its feet. What had people thought this node was before the world went gone? Had they known that it had drawn them to their neighborhood, that it had kept them there, made their lives better when they were happy, and worse when they were sad? Had they known it was an emotional antenna? Almost certainly not. Those poor, magic-starved souls. "Yes," Sparrow said, "this is the node." "Good job," Machuk. "Can you do the spell?" Machuk asked. "Are you strong enough?" "That doesn't matter," Sparrow replied. "I have to do it." He began the rite. He closed his eyes and tried to ignore everything but the healing energies pulsing from the stone. They were weak, but they were there. It had to be enough. He would make it enough. Sparrow cast his circles, hurrying. He said the incantations, did the cantrips. Magic pumped through him, more powerful than ever before. He strained to keep it inside. It had to be his entirely for the summoning to work. He knelt before the menhir and said the first part of the final incantation. Then a platform burst through the building behind him. LeChuck's eyes went moon-wide in horror. She clenched her teeth, cords standing out from her neck. Wild, she lunged to push Sparrow out of the way, but he turned and caught her. He pushed her instead, hoping she wouldn't sprain anything as she fell. And then the platform flattened him with a barrage of particle fire. With that, I close the book and I shall return to finish chapter 9 next time. As always, thank you for listening. Peace, love, and kindness. And I will see you next time.